For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Mutsabi Hoyani. Researcher and analyst Professor Raymond Suttner joins me for Suttner's View, a weekly commentary on South Africa's political scene. Thank you, Professor, for your time. Now, the question of race and racism continue to bedevil South African society, even after 20 years of democracy. Is this rather an exaggeration, and what do we attribute this to?
I think we should not expect that racism should simply disappear when we have a constitution that says this state is founded on non-racialism. You can't change people's habits through legislation. Equally, it is recognized in the Constitution that positive steps have to be taken to redress historical disabilities, because blacks and whites do not start at the same point. I, for example, have had a lot of opportunities which almost all black people did not have. Consequently, I've been able to achieve certain things academically, in writing, and in various other ways. I think, however, that the way some people approach this question is a problem. They say that if you use the word race, or if you use racial categories, you're perpetuating racism. Now, it's part of an academic discourse where race is not a scientific category, therefore we shouldn't use it. Now, I find this type of thinking a way of evading the problem that we're dealing with. Because if you walk down the street, I, as a white person, will not be called a Kaffir in the Free State or some parts of Limpopo. In the days of apartheid, I would not have been stopped and asked for a pass. So we have to recognize that race may be an unscientific category, but it is a social phenomenon that has to be addressed. If you are being clubbed as a so-called Kaffir, the fact that the word race is unscientific is not going to stop you from being clubbed. The racist will not be deterred by science. Now, this issue has arisen, in my view, in relation to the incident on the University of Free State campus, where two young white men are alleged to have called people Kaffirs and in their bakkie rode over one African man. Two women claim to have been called Kaffirs as well. Now, the University of Free State Vice-Chancellor, Jonathan Jansen, for 2 successive days, the last time was on Friday, said he was not sure that this was a racist incident. Now, I find that problematic, because if a person has been raped, you don't stand by and wait before giving support until the court case has proved that the person has been raped. Your job in relation to someone who has suffered injury is to offer support. They have experienced it as racism, and to say that you are trying to evaluate whether or not it is racism is to turn the experience into some sort of sociological inquiry. And until you have decided, in terms of this sociological analysis or philosophical analysis, whether it qualifies to be called racism, you will hold your judgment. Now, that might be valid if it's something abstract, but this is concrete pain that people say they have experienced. Just as we stand by the rape survivor who has said she has been raped, we may have to revise our view if for some reason she's found to have lied, but we know how these cases are packed against the rape complainant. I feel that that was a problem, and it's may be related to this discourse of transcending race and what I would call race denialism. When you do not want to give the label of racism in cases like this, it is in a sense a form of race denialism, and I believe it does not serve South Africa. Some people have written, there's someone who's written on Thought Leader, a very interesting article, where he says, we have spent so much time loving the racist in the name of reconciliation, it has no effect. I think we must expend the same concern for the person who claims to be victimized.
Now, how best should we set about stopping racism and without falling into the trap of people who play the race card? And how do you think we should try to build on non-racialism?
See, I think one of the reasons why people object to using racial categories is that it is abused. Sometimes when someone is accused of corruption, that person will suggest that the person who's accusing him or her is actually a racist. Now, we had this even in the days of the struggle, where people would say that those who accused them of corruption or of doing this, that, and the other were part of an Indian cabal or some such thing. So there is a danger that just as racism is an abuse of human beings, that race can be used as a way of preventing discussion by saying that, by suggesting that this may be that someone or other may be unfit for some job, you are impugning the capacity of Africans or black people in general to hold positions that whites have held up to now. Now, that is a way, you don't examine the actual qualities of the person, you you prevent debate by saying this is racist. How do we address racism? My belief is that it's a complicated process. We have to uncover everywhere that racism is present, under the guise of some things being on merit alone. You're actually excluding some people who never had certain opportunities. Racism, to be openly a racist, is not on these days. So it operates semi-underground. If you go and stand in the queue at the bank at Eastgate, and there's an African tiller, and there's a long queue, some whites will be mumbling, saying, is she using an abacus there, or some such thing. This is the way in which interpersonal racism may play itself out. But in the public domain, and this happened also in the Free State, one has situations where a black person phones and asks about accommodation, and they say accommodation is full. And I've done this with my wife, actually. And then I phoned later, or a white person phones later, and they say, sure, come around and see it. So there've got to be steps taken to expose racism, but also to empower black people with the qualities. It's not desirable to focus purely on numbers. We should avoid setting people up for failure. In other words, if being an accountant requires that you have passed certain examinations, etc., we need to ensure that whoever is made an auditor has those qualifications, so that people don't say this is an affirmative action qualification appointment. At the same time, however, we need to examine examinations, that they are not controlled in a way that keeps it as a white preserve. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor. That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking about politics and elections in South Africa.